and I'm going to share my screen here. So this is our last virtual session of Biology A. Yay! And then we will have some in Biology B, obviously, but our next one's not going to be until February. We're going to have the same kind of setup. I have a calendar on the homepage of the course with all the dates for the labs. There's also going to be in Canvas. I'll actually show you guys this because I spent a lot of time making them, making the dates for the virtual sessions in the labs part of Canvas, so they should show up on your to-do list. So here's the calendar. Our first session for Biology B won't be until February 6th at 9 a.m. And then if you go into modules, once you have access to Biology B, well, within every single module, there are, this thing loads so slowly, there's virtual tickets and lab assignments with the due dates listed there. So you can see those coming up and they should show up on your Canvas calendar. And then at the bottom, I made a brand new module where I just listed all the dates, right? And some of those might be subject to change depending on if we need, to move the date around slightly, but those are generally when everything will be happening. So when you get access to Biology B, I think it's going to be a little easier to know when all this stuff is happening, since I tried to sort of plan it way in advance. Okay, so back to what we're doing today. Oh, come on, little toolbar thing. Okay, we got somebody saying something in the chat. Did you miss anything? Nope, I was just showing what Biology B is going to look like in terms of all of the exit slips and labs are actually embedded in modules this time, which is pretty sweet. All right, so ecosystems and ecology, right? We didn't do a virtual session about this in advance, mostly because ecosystems and ecology are a little easier for most people just because they draw from logic, right? There's a lot of vocabulary, but a lot of it means the same stuff. You may have noticed that there was overlapping vocabulary, right? Autotroph, plants, producer are basically all the same thing. So some of that stuff can be a little annoying, but for the most part, it's much simpler than genetics or some of these other topics that we're going to talk about. So the objectives for this virtual session, we're going to review a few key ecosystems, vocabulary, and concepts. We're not actually going to review the vocabulary. I kind of changed my mind about that just because I think at this point, most people have finished this module. So we're just going to talk about the concepts here. Again, if you need a source for vocabulary or you're having issues with the vocabulary, let me know because I can add tons of resources for that. So we're going to demonstrate the interdependence of organisms by organizing the story of the day it literally rained cats. And we're going to discuss the moral and ethical implications of ecology via the Henry David Thoreau essay. So, first things, ecosystems, right? These are the three main summary points that I came up with for ecosystems. You might want to write these down. Again, this PowerPoint will be posted. Sorry, my dog always wants to play like a crazy dog right now. Whenever I do virtual sessions, he like loses his mind. Relax. But I'm going to post this on 2 modules as well, so you'll be able to see it. So ecosystems are composed of abiotic and biotic things, right? So we're talking here about non-living and living things together. Energy is transferred up the food chain or food web, right? So it starts with the sun, goes to the plants, and then moves up to producers. To consumers. Too much vocabulary. Haven't had my coffee yet. Hendrik, go away. So energy is lost on the way, and that's a key factor in ecosystems, right? If you think about it, like if you're thinking about a primary consumer, like a cow eating grass, right? They have to eat a lot of grass to get enough energy, because some of that energy is lost, right? Same with us. We have to eat more, like, well, compared to our body size, not really more, but for our body size, we have to eat a lot to get that energy. It's actually 10% is lost on each level that you go up. So it's a significant loss here. All organisms are interdependent upon each other and are balanced by carrying capacity and environmental restrictions, right? So a lot of people who've done the DBAs with me, right, really nailed this question about carrying capacity. It's just the amount of organisms that the ecosystem can support, right? And it's going to really depend on environmental restrictions, but also other factors, right? Like birth rate and death rate. Like humans, we have 1, maybe 2 children at a time, right? Other animals like dogs have 9, 10 at a time. So even something like that can influence the carrying capacity. And then environmental restrictions, right? If there's not enough water, there's not enough space, there's not enough food, there's not enough shelter, etc. So I picked this graphic here because I like that it shows the abiotic and biotic things, and then it kind of shows these circles that are overlapping. There's like a plant community, which is part of a habitat, which is part of a bigger ecosystem, right? So ecosystems are pretty large things, and maybe one of the only hard words you guys might have learned, I'll write it here because it's spelled really strangely, niche, right? You might have seen this word. This is probably the hardest word, I think, of ecosystems because it doesn't really make sense, but it does make sense. It's one of those. So this is basically just a smaller habitat of an ecosystem. So in this case, the plant community that we're seeing here, right, as part of a habitat, that would be a niche. So it's kind of like a place in the ecosystem, a place in the ecosystem where things live. Sorry guys, my brain is not awake today. Okay. Whew. So that might be a word that you encounter that's a little bit complicated. Okay. Blah, 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 boring. Let's get to the fun stuff. Fun stuff here is the day that it literally rained cats. So this is based on a true story, and I'm going to give you a tiny bit of background here just because otherwise you might be a little confused. But basically back in the 40s, 50s, I believe possibly into the 60s, DDT was used. Kendrick, stop. Come here. Come. DDT was used as a pesticide to kill mosquitoes, right? And it was very effective, killed them completely. And as you know, mosquitoes are really annoying, right? But they also carry disease. So that's mainly what this was used for, was to help eliminate malaria, right? And other diseases that are carried by mosquitoes. So we didn't really know what DDT did other than that it killed mosquitoes. So people were like, yeah, let's spray it everywhere. In fact, there's a few famous pictures of people standing. You can just see clouds of this stuff like floating around in the air, right? Which seems kind of gross, but people were like, oh, well, it's killing mosquitoes. Who cares? So then we found out that DDT actually gets stored in fat tissue, right? So do I have this? I don't think I have the book anymore. I must have lent it to someone. So I read this book called The History of Breasts, which is like a strange thing, but it was about this environmental toxins and how they get stored in fat tissue, and then they actually get released in breast milk to babies, and then you store those toxins in your fat tissue, right? So there's a pretty high chance that if you're mother was ever around DDT in any capacity, you probably have a small percentage of it in your body if you were breastfed. Which is insane because they don't use it anymore. It's completely illegal, right? You'll never encounter it in your life, but yet it's in your tissue. Pretty scary stuff. Basically, everything you touch, toxins can get into your fat tissue, which is the scary part. Even being in your car, toxins from the plastic in your car get into your body and get stored in fat tissue, right? So if you want to read that book, let me know because I'll send you a link to it. It's really scary but interesting. Okay, so now that I freaked you out and you know probably that you have DDT in your body right now, what we're going to do is you're going to make a copy of this document. So I'll actually post the link here in the chat. So usually this activity is designed to be done with somebody. So if you want to talk in the chat to people, if you want someone to be your partner and you want to both work on the same document, that's fine. Why isn't it loading? But basically what we're going to do, if it ever shows up here, is we're going to be placing these events in order. This is not good. All right, let me see if it'll open on my drive. Okay, that's weird. I wonder, okay, now it opened, of course. So, okay, you're gonna be copying this document and you're gonna be putting these events in order. You could do it by yourself, you could talk in the chat. I will give you a hint that number one is that the World Health Organization provided DDT to the citizens of Borneo, I believe is how you say it. I looked it up before. I think I'm getting it right. So here's the link to the document, right? This is just kind of an interesting situation because this is a true story. So read through the events, think about what order you think they might have happened, and obviously somehow cats are going to be reigning in the end here. So I'm going to give you guys a few minutes. Again, feel free to talk in the chat to each other. If you want to invite someone to your document to work with you, that's perfectly fine. If you want to work by yourself, also fine. Okay. I feel like I should play a song or something because it's just like completely silent right now. But for those of you who are watching from home, you can be doing this activity too. I mean, excuse me, watching the recorded version. You can click on the document from the PowerPoint and you'll get the same exact document here. the PowerPoint link. I haven't published it yet actually, I can do that right now. Get away thing, come on. You guys are getting an inside look at what I do to publish stuff here. Kendrick, relax. All right, when you guys are getting close to finishing, you know, the best order that you think you have, just send me a done or a thumbs up or something so that I know that you're getting close to getting ready to talk about this. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep letting you guys look. That's okay. It's a really hard order to get. So if you're done, but you're like, I don't know, it's fine. I'm going to tell you the answers. So don't worry about it. I just want you to read through it and think about it and think about how one thing made such a big difference here. Okay, we got a couple people finishing, so I'll give you guys probably like 2 more minutes. I'm going to refill my coffee and then we'll go over it. Okay. So we got some people finishing. If you're not quite finished, hopefully you've at least looked at the document. And we're going to go through it right now and talk about the correct order here. So I'm going to annotate on it because I don't want to give the answers to people who haven't had the chance to try yet. All right, so let's see if there's an easy way for me to do this. I guess I'll just do a lot of text box. So what did you guys put for number, well, I told you number 1 was that the WHO, the World Health Organization, provided DDT to the citizens of Borneo, I believe. I'm probably going to say it wrong forever. I don't know why. That word just doesn't look like it sounds to me. Okay, that was number one. What did you guys say was number two? Any ideas for what number two might be? Mosquitoes were killed. Exactly. Right, so number two is going to be that the mosquitoes were eradicated, which means killed, right? And eradicated means like completely, like exterminated. Awesome, that was number two. All right, what do you guys think was number three? This is where it starts getting messy. I'm gonna mute. Okay. Caterpillars infested and consumed the grass roofs. That's a good guess. So before the caterpillars can infest the roofs, the roaches, oh no, those things don't stay next. Oh no. Okay, I'll just write them in and then we'll erase them. As soon as I scroll, those numbers go away. That's not a good thing. Okay. Yeah, the roaches is where we're going to be going next. So we have the WHO is number one. The mosquitoes eradicated is number two. Number three is that the roaches start to store DDT in their bodies, right? So even though roaches, you don't really envision them as having fat, right? They do have fatty substances in their bodies that can store that DDT. And so it didn't affect them, right? It doesn't kill them, but it's there, it's in their bodies. Okay, so then who is going to be affected next? Who's eating those roaches? Lizards, good. So lizards consumed those roaches. Now this is where it's a problem, right? This is called bioaccumulation of a toxin. The roaches have DDT, it's not killing them. If you're a lizard and you eat 40 roaches a day, you're taking in 40 times that toxin, right? That's going to start affecting you. It's the same thing for us with fish, right? You might have heard, like, don't eat too much tuna, right? Because it has mercury. So the same thing is true. There's a little bit of mercury in some fish. Doesn't kill the fish, but if you eat a large amount of fish, it can kill you. Right, we're talking a lot, like you're eating fish for every meal kind of situation. But it's happened to people, right? They've gotten like a little bit of mercury poisoning from that. All right, so the lizards consume the roaches, they retained the DDT, and then what's gonna happen to the lizards? Yeah, they become lethargic. What does lethargic mean? For maybe some of us who are like, I don't know what that is. I'm feeling lethargic right now. It means tired, right? The lizards became tired and they're like moving slowly. They're not able to do as much as they normally can. Okay, so they slow down, then what happens? By the way, there's kind of more than one answer here. There's a place here where you can kind of have multiple things going on at once, but who's eating the lizards? Okay, caterpillar numbers increasing. We're not quite there yet. Not quite there yet. So the cats are eating the lizards. So number 6 here is that the cats caught and consumed the lizards eating DDT. And then what's going to happen to the cats? They're going to die, right? The cats die. And while the cats are dying, the lizards are disappearing, right? Because some of the lizards are probably dying from the DDT. The rest of the lizards are getting eaten by the cats because they're so slow that it's easy, right? The cat just goes, eats them. They don't have to try. The lizard's like, because it's sick and dying. All right, so lizards are gone, cats are dying, right? Now, what's happening? Whoever said the caterpillar numbers increased? Caterpillar numbers are increasing. Why? Who's eating the caterpillars? No one? The lizards, right? The lizards are eating the caterpillars and the roaches. And because the lizards are now dead or lethargic, right, the caterpillars are multiplying like crazy. There's no one there to eat them. There's no one there to keep them in check. So caterpillars are going crazy. They need something to eat. So now they're going to infest these grass roofs, right? We're talking about a location here in Indonesia where most of the housing still has roofs made out of grass, right? So now there's like 1,000 caterpillars in your roof eating it. Okay? Then at the same time, right, we have our rats multiplying. This is kind of at the same time. Because who was probably eating the rats? The cats, right? And the cats are dying because they're sick. So now the rats are like, oh, cool, nothing's eating me. And then, of course, the rats brought the plague. And we're talking the bubonic plague, the plague that killed millions of people in Europe, right? Like serious, serious disease here. Very intense bacterial infection, right? So now we have a problem. First of all, we had people getting malaria. And so we got rid of the mosquitoes. Now we have people getting the plague. We have their house being eaten, right? And we have all these other animals dying or having issues. So what does the World Health Organization decide to do? They think, well, okay, we need cats back. We got to get some cats in here. So they actually parachuted cats in. In boxes, they parachuted cats in to try to help kill the rats, right? To try to help kill the lizards and hopefully try to get the ecosystem back in balance, right? So that's kind of the story of how this happened. So there is an actual New York Times article about this that's in the tiniest font of all time. I have to like get next to my computer, but it says, one day in 1969, the villagers in Malaysian Borneo looked upward and saw a sky filled with cats. The Royal Air Force had parachuted the cats into the remote mountain village to solve an ecologic dilemma that was literally bringing the roofs down. The mass feline drop climaxed what had begun as a well-meaning campaign by the World Health Organization to control malaria in the village through the use of insecticides. The DDT did indeed kill disease-carrying mosquitoes, but the chemical also accumulated in cockroaches. Some of the cockroaches died, but most built up a resistance to the DDT. Geckos, the lizards that ate the DDT-infested cockroaches, were more affected by the chemical. The speedy lizards, right? You guys have seen geckos. They're those tiny little green lizards that are like darting all over the place. Long accustomed to scampering up walls and across ceilings to evade hungry cats, began slowing down. They were caught and eaten by the cats, which in turn died. The disappearance of the cats and geckos was but the beginning in this disrupting ecologic chain of events in the isolated village. Rats, their defiance mounting in direct proportion to the declining feline population, swarmed into the village. Then the caterpillars squirmed their way up into this ecologically chaotic scene, and the thatched roofs in the village began to collapse, right? And then blah, 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 blah. They talk about the cats coming in, etc. So this happened a long time ago, right? 1969. They were still using DDT in the 60s, at least in other parts of the world. And this is a really, really classic example of well-meaning humans ruining and destroying an ecosystem, right? Which today we try not to mess with ecosystems too much, but this kind of stuff happens all the time, right? Especially with invasive species. Ooh, this plant is cool. I want to plant that in my yard. It's not native to your area. It will disrupt and ruin possibly the ecosystem, right? So it's one of those things where you change one thing and you literally changed the entire ecosystem. And sometimes you can change one thing and it's fine, right? So it's hard to know. And of course, we can't help but try to mess with nature and make it better, as we would think. So that's a nice segue into this other piece of this virtual session here. Henry David Thoreau, right, a very beloved author. I personally think he's kind of boring, but he is a big deal in the literary world. I actually have this entire book called Keeping Things Whole, which is a ton of ecological readings. Some of them are really long and complicated, but they all sort of raise these moral questions. Like there's some essays about land. Who really owns land? Does the government own land? Do people own land? Or does nature own land? Right? And whose responsibility is it to take care of land and to take care of areas? And then there's also a really famous one that you guys might have heard called Tragedy of the Commons, which basically just talks about how when we all share a space, no one takes care of it, right? Which you may have noticed if, like sometimes, not so much at Miwok because it's not like packed with people all the time, but if you think back to a brick and mortar school that you've ever been to, right, like the hallways, everyone kind of owns the hallway, right? It's like a collective area, and the hallways always look horrible at the end of the day. There's like paper, pencils, garbage, like random clothing, like someone lost a scarf or something, right, all over the place, and everyone just kind of walks by without looking at it, right? And then, you know, a janitor or somebody comes and cleans it up. But yeah, so there's a bunch of people who used to write about this kind of stuff, not so much anymore. But basically, like as a conscious human, right, should we be more aware of our impacts on an ecosystem? And is it our job to preserve nature, or should we leave it alone? Right? Like there used to be this huge to-do about preventing fires. Well, fires are actually helpful to ecosystems sometimes, right? Obviously not if you light something on fire and throw it into a forest. That's not the kind of fire we're talking about. But natural fires can help ecosystems go through succession, and that can actually help them become stronger. But, you know, so it's kind of things like that where we shouldn't be destroying stuff, but then should we be preventing nature from doing its own thing? It's a hard question to answer. So I posted these questions for you guys to think about here, and I just want to talk about a couple of them a little bit here. And you're going to turn in a few of them to me as your exit for this. And I'm actually going to be adding up to 10 points onto your segment 1 exam based on your completing these questions. So if you turn in the questions to me and you got a 75 on the exam, I will add 10 points to make it an 85. So that's a pretty sweet deal. All right. So hopefully you read this essay. It's called Death of a Pine, right? It's pretty much about a tree getting chopped down. So I'm going to ask you guys a couple of these questions, and you can type in the chat. If you want to talk because it's too much to type, you can. But what do you think Thoreau's attitude towards the men who are sawing down the tree is? Is he happy? Is he sad? Is he just kind of like observing? Contempt? Yeah, right? I would completely agree with you, Janie Mae. He does not seem happy about it. And he's not really just like, yeah, he called them insects, right? And partially because he's so far away that he sees them, they're really tiny, but also because insect is not like, that's not something you tell someone as a compliment, right? Hopefully you're not taking that as a compliment if someone calls you an insect. Yeah, he's not happy about it, right? He's like, look at these men, they're sawing down this tree. And it's interesting too, because his perspective, he's seeing like the larger scale here, right? These men are seeing the tree and they're like, all right, we got to chop this tree down. Let's do it. Thoreau is seeing the entire forest, right? And he's seeing what a disturbance this one tree is causing. So question 2 is a really hard one. What do you think the tree represents for Thoreau? I'll let you think on that one. And in fact, that would be a great question to bring to your ELA class. But then questions 4 and 5 here are super important and a little more sciencey. So he says at one point in this essay, somewhere like in the middle-ish of it, he says, "It is lumber. He has laid waste the air." What does that mean? Janie May providing an excellent insight here. Is anyone else going to talk to me about this essay? Yeah, you're exactly right. So the tree was cut down, it's now lumber, right? But now it's not doing what it's supposed to do, which is absorb carbon dioxide, right? And wasting the oxygen that the tree provides. Exactly, right? They're taking away the functionality of the tree and creating lumber, which has a completely different functionality, right? It's probably going to become a house, or a pencil or something else, right? Paper, possibly. Great. So that's like actually a scientific meaning here, which is rare because usually literary people don't actually talk about science. But he's right. They're laying waste to the air. There's no more oxygen being produced from that tree. It's not absorbing carbon dioxide anymore, right? And now it's just lumber. That's it. And then number 5 is an interesting one. What do the squirrel and the hawk do after the fall? This is at the very end of the essay here. Let's see. Okay. He's talking about why is no one ringing bells for the tree, right? Like you would for a person when they die. And then he says, the squirrel has leaped to another tree, the hawk has circled further off, and has now settled upon a new eyrie, but the woodman is preparing to lay his axe at the root of that also. Right? And that's the end of it. So their home is gone. They have to find new ones. The muscovy circle in vain to find his custom perch. Yeah. Right? They move to a different tree. They flee. Right? So that makes sense, right? Hawks and squirrels are obviously not like, let's attack the person chopping down our home. Right? But then if the woodman is really preparing to chop down more trees, what's going to happen eventually to the squirrel and the hawk? Yeah, they're going to have no home, right? So this is a really good example of sort of what we have done basically ever since humans have existed, is we have created our little civilizations, our areas, right, where we want to push nature out, right? We want concrete and roads and infrastructure and buildings, etc. And we've constantly pushed these animals out of where they, are supposed to be. And sometimes it's fine, they're able to find new homes, but other times that process itself can actually destroy and disrupt ecosystems, where that squirrel and that hawk might end up having to relocate to a completely different area where maybe they suddenly start getting, new predators who are eating them. Probably not the hawk, but the squirrel, right? The squirrel might encounter new predators. Now, what's interesting too is if you guys have ever been to a really big city, like New York City, I don't know if they have squirrels in LA. Do they? I can't remember. It's been a while since I've been there. But those squirrels have actually adapted to the concrete, right? In the sense that they hang out in the little pieces of nature that are left, in the tiny parks. Like there's parks in New York that are a tiny little circle with a tree, and squirrels hang out there. And they're not scared of people, right? And they'll come up to you and get food from you, and it's a little bit creepy. So that's kind of what we're forcing here, is the squirrels either have to keep getting pushed further and further away, or they have to, learn to adapt. So the way that would work, right, and this is a common misconception about evolution, is the squirrels aren't all just like having a meeting and they're like, you know what, maybe we should trust the human and go towards the humans and let's do that. No, there's one brave and possibly dumb squirrel who's like, oh, you know what, I'm going to live here and go hang out with the human. And he survived, right? Maybe he got a lot of extra food or something. Someone dropped a pretzel on the floor and he went crazy, right? If that squirrel reproduces and somehow his brave, fearlessness is inherited, right, into his offspring, then they'll probably stick around, do a similar situation until eventually you have an entire population of squirrels, right, sort of originating from these one or two brave souls who all kind of have that fearlessness and they're able to live in that area, right? So that's kind of how an adaptation happens. It happens slowly over time. It doesn't happen to just one animal, right? It's not like a bird was sitting there and thought, I need wings, and then grew wings, right? That's not how it happens, unfortunately. So basically a few squirrels who were brave and probably would have been killed in a different time, right, were able to sort of hang around in the area. Anyway, that was like a complete side note, but interesting stuff. So I'm going to have you guys turn in to me. Let's see, I wrote here. I want you to turn in questions. Oh, you know what? We went over 4 and 5. So why don't we do questions 1, 2, and 4. Okay. So you're going to turn in, just email to me your answers to questions 1, 2, and 4. Right? And I'm not looking for like, you're right, you're wrong, because a lot of these are open to interpretation. So just read through the essay and think about it to yourself, right? This isn't an English class. I just want you to kind of see this connection between nature and writing and ethics and morals here, because they are pretty closely interconnected. So please email to me questions 1, 2, and 4 as an exit ticket. And like I said, I'll be adding up to 10 points onto your segment exam, so covering all of the material. You can't get more than 100, unfortunately, so if you get a 95, I'll only be able to add 5 points. But that should be nice because you'll have a 10-point buffer. Okay, so otherwise, that is going to be the end here of this virtual session. You're emailing to me questions 1, 2, and 4. I will update that on the Canvas module. There's also, I put the PowerPoint there as well. It's called Final Virtual Session on 123, Ecosystems and Ecology. The essay's there, the questions are there. I'm gonna right now edit it so that questions 1, 2, and 4 are the ones that you're going to turn in here. All right. And then otherwise, oops, I'm in the wrong, where's Zoom at? Okay, otherwise we are done. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. I'm going to take a screenshot of who's here. Let's see. How do I see everybody at once? I can't. There we go. Okay. Okay, thank you, Kayla. All right, yeah, I got everybody here. I realized I can just open who the participants are and I can take a screenshot and it's like really fast. So, okay, awesome. So we're done. I'm gonna end the meeting. Feel free to email me any questions you have. Make sure you email me your answers to questions 1, 2, and 4. Am I gonna need your copy of The Day It Rained Cats? Nope, that's just for your own personal use. You can even delete it if you want. But it is interesting to look back on. One day you'll be like, oh yeah, that weird story. All right, cool. So I will talk to you guys soon.